was really a black swan for law enforcement in general, something that was going on for a while, we didn't know. Suicide by cop. Guy named William Griffin took hostages in Rochester, New York, and said, "Look, if you guys don't come in and kill me, I'm going to kill a hostage." Now we didn't know that this stuff had been going on for a while. We'd never really seen it before. At that point in time, we never saw a hostage getting killed on deadline. On the exact time that he said that he needed to be killed by, when we didn't go in and kill him, he walks a hostage to the front door, levels a shotgun behind her, and blows her out the front door of the bank.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. My guest today was the #1 lead kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. Also the author of the best-selling book, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. You may be wondering what hostage negotiations have to do with you, but your reputation, career and relationships all rely on your ability to negotiate. When it comes to mastering the negotiation process, this guy has been there and done it all. In our illuminating conversation, we examine the bank robbery that changed negotiating forever, the weapon-grade techniques you can use to be successful in all business negotiations, why your personality type affects your negotiation style, and the two most critical skills you need to become a master negotiator. By using his techniques, you're guaranteed to have the competitive edge in any negotiation, and you may also be able to guarantee yourself a free upgrade. So if you want to learn more about Chris and his company Black Swan, visit blackswanlimited.com to gain access to tons of free resources such as actionable blog articles, and be sure to sign up for the weekly newsletter. The tools are game changers regardless of where you are in your negotiation journey. So please welcome the former lead negotiator for the FBI, Mr. Chris Voss, to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast.
Chief hostage negotiator for the FBI, 150 incidents. How does someone become a chief hostage negotiator for the FBI?
You know, it's an awful lot like being an entrepreneur. You know, you got to learn, you got to be self-initiated, you got to be interested, you got to love it. You know, I started out, I was originally on a SWAT team with the FBI. I was at FBI Pittsburgh. I was on a SWAT team there, got transferred to New York. Tried out for the Bureau's version of the Navy SEALs, which is the hostage rescue team. Aggravated an old knee injury, had another knee surgery, you know, and they could only fix the knee so many times. So I decided before I blow it out entirely, you know, maybe stay in crisis response. But the negotiators, you know, those guys sit around in a nice warm room while the SWAT guys are out laying in the mud and the rain. Like, yeah, let me try some of that warm room stuff. How hard could it be? And it ended up being like anything that looks easy, it's in depth and satisfying. So I started showing up, and you show up enough and the right things happen. And I showed up for a bank robbery with hostages, and then I like teaching people what happened. It was a crazy scenario. And the people that ran our negotiation operation, they were looking for people that were self-initiated and coachable. That's really all it took. And I was, and they continued to let me work as hard as I want to, and they supported me. And pretty much a few years later, I'm in charge of our response to all our international kidnappings.
So it sounds, it's certainly, in terms of negotiation, you've certainly learnt your craft on the cutting edge, I guess. So your company's called Black Swan, and I read your book, and I thought it was interesting to sort of share, you know, what is a black swan, and maybe you could kind of, I guess, tease us with a little bit of the story in chapter 10, where I guess you kind of explain a little bit about that as well. So I wonder if you could kind of sort of touch on that story for us.
Yeah, you know, it's the unexpected stuff that nobody ever saw coming that changed everything. I mean, it was inspired by the concept. Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote a book in 2007 called The Black Swan: The Impact of the Highly Improbable. You know, and that idea, which he derived from, you know, 16th, 17th century Europe, a black swan was something that would never happen. You know, they had nothing but white swans, and they thought a black swan was something that was impossible. And then they discovered black swans in Australia. And yeah, these things are out there. So in chapter 10, you know, what was really a black swan for law enforcement in general, something that was going on for a while, we didn't know: suicide by cop. Guy named William Griffin took hostages in Rochester, New York, and said, "Look, if you guys don't come in and kill me, I'm going to kill a hostage." Now we didn't know that this stuff had been going on for a while. We'd never really seen it before. At that point in time, we never saw a hostage getting killed on deadline. On the exact time that he said that he needed to be killed by, when we didn't go in and kill him, he walks a hostage to the front door, levels a shotgun behind her, and blows her out the front door of the bank. It happened to be her son's birthday that day. And he walks over to a window and stands and waits. And the sniper that shot him said, "I put the crosshairs on his forehead and I dropped him." We didn't know that this stuff was there. It was staring us in the face all along. We didn't know what the indicators were. Had to see the indicators, what's lurking beneath the surface. It's waiting for you to dig it out. I thought, that's what we do in negotiation. You're trying to dig out the stuff that's beneath the surface. If you could dig it out, it'd change everything. It's usually small pieces of information, innocuous. Plus, if you don't even got to master the Black Swan method. If you just start learning the Black Swan method, immediately you start digging stuff out in your negotiations and making huge differences. My mission as a kidnapping negotiator was to save people's lives. As a business coach now, is to help people change their own lives. It's pretty cool, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
So, in terms of, I'll call it a skill, really, because it is, and I've heard you talk about it's a skill that you
Yep.
have to continuously develop because it will drop off.
Yeah.
Being in something like the FBI, I guess, where they are really on the edge of some of these developments. How, in that particular situation, how do you learn about where to take this? Because I read that you're involved with Harvard, and there was who also have a negotiation course, and there was sort of two kind of schools of thought. One was more of a kind of logical school of thought, and one was a
Right.
more emotional. So how is that? How did that point kind of was that a sort of I guess a transition point, and how have we learned more about the skill of negotiations?
Well, I got there by something going bad. We had a kidnapping in the Philippines, and we just had a huge success. And sometimes you got to watch out. A huge success gets you overconfident. Maybe you miss something. Train may be coming. The light at the end of the tunnel may be a train coming down the tracks. And we just had a huge success in the Philippines. Re-engaged on another case with the same group, different players on the other side, but the same group. Burnham Sabero kidnapping ended 13 months later with a botched rescue attempt. Hostages killed by friendly fire. I mean, just ugly. And we did an after action of everything that we did, and our determination was we did everything we knew how to do. This was just out of our control. That wasn't good enough for me. The great Irish philosopher Colin McGregor said, "I win or I learn." You get knocked down hard, you better learn from it, or you better find something else to do. So if we applied everything we knew in law enforcement, I'm like, I got to go outside. We got to go outside law enforcement, collaborate. I started looking around, and Bob Mnookin at Harvard had written a book called Beyond Winning, which has got a great chapter in the book on empathy called The Tension Between Empathy and Assertiveness. This is a Harvard guy. This is a business guy. This is a lawyer talking about empathy. And it's still one of the best chapters on empathy I've ever read. I mean, we give this chapter to every new coach we bring on because we got to make sure that our coaches coaching business understand this. And Bob defined empathy exactly the same way we did in the FBI. And I thought, all right, two completely different schools of thought agreeing on empathy. We got to dive in with these guys and see what they're talking about. And that's when the collaboration started. And they were and still are a very logical approach to negotiation. And the problem is humans aren't logical. So I started collaborating with those guys and realized that on that concept we agreed. And then we started exchanging ideas and exchanging information. And, my first negotiation with Bob is actually the opening story in the book. And I'll remember that. I remember that day as if it was yesterday. It was a great interaction.
And so, in terms of that learning, then is this something that because you've obviously got a pretty solid process now, is that from your perspective, is that a process that is just there and we've kind of learned as much as we can from it, or do you see things happening like even today in the news where it's like, oh, actually, maybe that that idea probably needs updating, just as you had the conversation with the guys at Harvard?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's three reasons why the Black Swan method is continually evolving. Let me see if I can tag all of them. First of all, we're a team. You want to go far. If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go as a team. Like the intellectual property, the IP that the Black Swan Group creates is principally from my thinking, my son Brandon's, and our best coach, Derek. And we each sort of bring a different aspect. I do most of the public appearances. Brandon actually runs a company. My son runs our company and does more negotiations than any one of the three of us. He's a brilliant negotiator. Derek does our coaching. Now, Brandon, in applying the Black Swan method, will come up with something new and just score a huge win. So the process is always evolving. It has to. We're constantly learning. There was a Dutch Shell executive a long time ago said the ability to learn faster than your competition is the only sustainable competitive advantage. And we are competitive, and we are constantly pushing what we're learning forward. We've learned a bunch of stuff since the book came out 5 years ago. We've created some methodology in the last year because we're constantly applying it. None of our competition is applying it as much as we are. None of our competition coaches as much as we do. Derek could be coaching somebody, and in the midst of the coaching process, will discover a new concept that had been staring us in the face for a long time. So, yeah, we're constantly learning it, and we believe that Jim Camp said a long time ago, negotiation is a human performance event, which means, as soon as you stop practicing, you start losing your skills. And we're very conscious of that, so we practice it constantly.
One of the key things about negotiation is to have a vision. So if we now sort of take that into a hostage situation, then what you would be trying to do as a negotiator is to understand what the other person's vision is. Would that be correct?
Yeah, and they're going to start giving me clues as soon as they start communicating. Like, what is this indicating? I'm looking for indicators that add up. Like one of our favorite exercises, which we put business people through, is what we call the 60 seconds or she dies exercise. I play a hostage, bank robber. I have people volunteer as negotiators, and I'll say, I need a car in 60 seconds or she dies. Now, what's buried in there is if I'm asking for a car, then my vision of the future is my survival. I want to live. So most people would say, if I made the demand, I need a car in 60 seconds or she dies. If you want to be honest, you might say, look, we can't give you a car. Or if you don't know how to be honest, you say, I'll try, which is a lie in disguise. But if you're listening for emotional intelligence, you'll say, sounds like you want to live. Now, how do you transfer that to a business scenario? Somebody says, look, you discount your price or I'm going someplace else. Your real response there for the future is, or their current, how they're being held hostage, sounds like you're under a lot of pressure. Sounds like this deal matters a lot to you. Sounds like you want to make a deal that carries your career forward. That's how you start to listen for that stuff.
So in terms of the goal, then, so as we said, sort of main goal is to try and understand like what their vision is, which you're saying you'll pick that up through clues. I guess you won't necessarily know what it is until you start talking. The other thing that you mentioned, which I thought was quite interesting, particularly as it relates to hostages, is you mentioned that the goal is collaboration, because you're looking for a sort of long-term relationship. So how would that I suppose, long-term relationship with a bomber or someone who's going
Right.
to, kill people. How does, it sounds like it's a universal principle, but how does that make sense in that situation then?
Yeah, it's a great question because everybody imagine these hostage scenarios are one-off situations. So you could lie or you're not going to see them again. But then as we got experience in the field, a quick example, siege in Baltimore. Guy's got two hostages, been on a manhunt for him for 10 days. 10 days earlier, he'd murdered four people. They finally get him cornered. He's got two hostages. Negotiators get on the phone. They're a little rattled to start out with. Because they're a little bit rattled, he literally says to him on the phone, "You're not doing a good job. You're supposed to be establishing a rapport with me." He'd been barricaded before. He was a repeat customer. What we found was if we successfully negotiated somebody out, the best indicator of future is past behavior. They took hostages and lived once. The chances that they're going to take hostages and live again, or at least take hostages, very high because they coped with a problem in the past and they survived. And then we started seeing it and we realized we're going to get repeat customers. And if they don't repeat, then what we said and did is going to get out and our reputation is going to precede us. We had another siege in Louisiana. Guy took a whole bank of people hostage, not because he was robbing a bank. He was actually potentially orchestrating his own murder. Again, potential suicide by cop. They talk him out. He gets into prison. Lo and behold, a couple weeks later, he's managed to take a prison guard hostage. So we got these repeat customers, and we have to interact with everybody as if we're going to see them again. And our reputation mattered. So if you live by that rule and assume in your world that there's no such thing as a one-off negotiation, your reputation will always precede you in a really good way.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
Okay. So that sort of leads on then to the second question, which is the name of your book. I've done the exercise. I think there's a name for it. I've been at a bunch of seminars where you do this negotiation and someone gives you some money and then you have to kind of figure out how to. You'll probably be able to tell me what that process is called. But in my mind, I suppose I sort of it seems to win in that game that you would split the difference. You would kind of, and that would be a fair way, and then everybody would be happy. But obviously, that's not your belief. So, can you explain then why it wouldn't make sense to split the difference in a negotiation?
Well, splitting the difference in most cases, there's going to be two scenarios there in splitting the difference. There's going to be the other side's actual desire for fundamental fairness, which is cool. You can, and you should have that, and you should intend to treat people fairly, and you need. I hate the word should actually. You need to respect their human need to be treated fair. So that's the first thing. Respect that. Now the second thing though is this fairness thing is such a massive stealth emotional trigger that the cutthroats, the sharks, understand that and will use it against us. They'll say something like, "I've given you a fair offer. I just want what's fair." And they found through experience that word will knock you off your emotional balance, your normal functioning level, as we used to say in hostage negotiation. Knocks you off balance. Because if I say to you, "Look, man, I just want what's fair," I'm going to hit a button inside you that's going to say, "Wow, have I been unfair? Maybe I have." Maybe I need to moderate. So let's go to the first scenario where fairness is an actual issue. I can treat you fairly without splitting the difference because of a second follow on problem. Lost things twice as much as equivalent gain. Nobel Prize economic theory, Daniel Kahneman. It's not me that thought this up. This is so accurate. A guy won the Nobel Prize for it. What does that mean in negotiations? If I take $5 out of your pocket, I think, all right, let's be fair. We'll each give up five.
Mhm.
You being a human being, you're going to feel like I hit you for 10. Lost things twice as much as an equivalent gain. Nobel Prize behavioral economics theory worldwide. Because you're a human, you're not going to feel like you gave up five. Emotionally, you're going to feel like you gave up 10. You're not going to feel even until you've hit me back for the equivalent of 10. Now, I'm a fair minded person on the other side. You just bang me for 10. I'm not going to be happy till I hit you for 20. That's how this downward spiral of splitting the difference causes everybody to be unhappy. If you want a long term relationship, a negotiated agreement that guarantees unhappiness will also guarantee that you will not have a long term relationship.
Right. And so is some of that then uh, does some of that relate to in the moment? So if you're in a negotiation, which is, I know you've talked about being on suicide hotlines where you've had to do something within 20 minutes and kind of make a change to someone. So in a hostage situation, which I guess is quite timely, but does that only relate to something that's very sort of in the moment, or can some of those decisions and those negotiations leave people feeling the same way or good about it over the long term? Is that, I guess, is it affected by the time period?
Yeah, it's a counterintuitive aspect of the whole thing because negotiation is a series of emotional moments. It's actually a quote from my son, Brandon Voss, and he's the one that really pointed that out to us. Now, if you take your eyes off of the objective and onto the moment, you'll actually get to the objective faster. And it's really counterintuitive. It makes no sense because it seems very indirect. We were engaged in an emotional negotiation just a couple of weeks ago, and we'd set aside an hour for the negotiation, doing a Zoom conference call. We prepped for what the other side was feeling about the negotiation because we were pushing them hard. We're making it very difficult for them. And Brandon started out saying, look, we know how much our demands are putting a strain on our relationship. And you could just see the relief coming across the people on the other side of the table. Because this was, everybody, nobody's trying to hurt each other. No, this is people trying to make a deal. But what we're asking for is straining them hard. So we set aside 60 minutes to get through this stage, and we were done in 17. That's how this stuff accelerates outcomes because we focused on the emotional moment at the time. Whatever it is, it's there. If they're human and they're not on literally on a life support system, there's emotions there. You focus on the emotions and everything accelerates.
So that brings up something that I've read in your book about deadlines. I
Right.
guess within the original story that you told, where the guy said, "Look, if you've not done it by 3 o'clock, this is happening," and it happened. I suppose in negotiations or even sales situations, there's a lot of pressure to kind of get people to do something within a certain time.
Yeah.
What's your view on deadlines? Because I guess, in some way you're actually, as the nature of a job of being a, a hostage negotiator in some respects. So how do you deal with that? Is it good to force them on into a conversation, or is there another way around that?
Yeah. Well, situation drives strategy. What's the context? What's the specificity of the threat? A lot of people in business are making threats in a very vague fashion that's designed to just put some progress into the process. The deadlines, and vast majority of the time just trying to provoke progress. Now, in Rochester, New York, he said, if you don't kill me by 2 o'clock, I'm going to kill a hostage. There's some real specifics there on who, what, when, and where. That's specificity. If he just, and we had to learn how to change that from a threat. In most cases, when we heard, if you guys come in, I'm going to kill a hostage. And that's a completely different threat. That's actually condition of agreement. Oh, so if we don't come in, you won't kill anybody? That's staring you right in face. So, what's the context of what's being said? How is it impacting the process, and how much specificity is there? What are their external constraints? As you said, this is happening all the time in business, usually at the end of the quarter. Somebody from procurement calls somebody in sales and says, you got 48 hours to give me a discount. Now they know that the salesperson's probably under quarterly pressure and probably worried about making their quota, and they're probably going to cave. I got a call from a head of sales once. He says, I want you to teach my people to not give in on price with 48 hours left in a quarter. And I'm like, it's real simple. If you don't cave, your procurement negotiator on the other side is going to have to wait 3 more months to get his deal. And procurement does not waste time with people they don't want to make deals with. So if they're demanding a discount in 48 hours, the pressure on them is actually greater than it is on you. All you got to do is appreciate what's really going on the other side and say to them, well, sounds like if you don't get this deal in 48 hours, you're perfectly content to wait 3 more months. They're going to freak out on the other side. So situation drives strategy. What's the context? What's the context telling you? What they're telling you in their words is really only 7% of what's really going on.
Okay. So that comes back onto this emotion. So deadlines create emotion, like the hostage situation.
Right.
I suppose that drove up emotion. If you're negotiating with someone in business, or even if you're trying to resolve a resolution and you really feel that you're in the right and they're in the wrong, my guess is that there's a lot of emotion attached to the conversation. I've been there, and it's quite difficult. So what's your advice about managing emotion when you're the one that's negotiating and you're trying to get collaboration, long-term partnership, but also to get the right end of the deal? How have you learned to kind of, or what tips and advice have you got to manage that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because I'd like to draw a fine line in that question too, because normally when we're talking about emotion as if it's a bad thing, we're talking about negative emotions. And negative emotions are a bad thing. Sean Acker, Harvard psychologist, did a great TED talk called The Happiness Advantage, The Business of Happiness. You know, I cite his talk all the time. You think I'd remember the title. The Happy Secret to Better Work. So it's the source of my data. Sean says you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. Salespeople are 37% more effective in a positive frame of mind. What's the flip side of that coin? When you're in a negative frame of mind, you're dumber. Not only are you dumber, but you have even more self-righteousness. Give a talk when you're angry, it'll be the greatest speech you ever regret. There's a self-righteousness, this downward spiral. So what do you do about it personally? One of the hacks is to be genuinely curious. Like, where are you coming from? I mean, really, I'm curious as to what makes you think that in your attitude, because you can't be in a negative frame of mind and genuinely curious at the same time. That's a quick hack. You need these sorts of devices because as a human being, our survival wiring is default mechanism negative. We're wired absent any other influence. We wake up in a negative frame of mind because it kept us alive when we were actually running away from saber-toothed tigers on a jungle path. We've all inherited this default wiring It's in our limbic system. There's a thing in there called the amygdala. Everybody's heard of the amygdala hijack or seeing red or the reptilian brain. That's something that we got to struggle with all the time. So you need a regular process to keep yourself in a positive frame of mind because it makes you smarter. And the alternative is to be dumber in a negative mindset.
And does that link into to fear as well? Because I
Yeah.
suppose depending on what the negotiator does, right?
Yep.
Okay. And so the
And
same.
fear hides itself too. Like if you say, well, I'm concerned, I'm worried, um, that's fear with a different mask on. And if you got a concern about something, it's a great indicator to you that you got some negativity you got to deactivate because it's holding you back otherwise.
And do you in that situation would it be advisable to hold showing any of that fear? You know, is it? I suppose you've been there. You seem very calm no matter what the situation is. But is that when you're in that situation, do you not want someone to understand how you're feeling, your emotions, and if you're fearful, and because that will work against you?
Well, it's more in your demeanor. And again, you can do another override. The late night FM DJ voice is a great way to control your own emotions. Like if I'm in a negotiation and I'm concerned about what's going to happen, if I say in a late night FM DJ voice, look, I'm concerned this is headed the wrong direction, I'm going to get two advantages from that, probably three. You're going to see me as being really genuine, and that's going to cause you to bond to me. It's going to give me more influence with you, what we call trust based influence. At the same time, I will have deactivated those fears in my head by naming them and also by me hearing the late night FM DJ voice. It actually calms me down not to just use it, but to hear myself use it. So there's a whole bunch of advantages to calling it out in a practiced voice that has a tendency to also override those emotions.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a fine line, and I like what you've said. I can't remember the term you just used, but like the trust-based influence, where
Trust-based influence.
yeah, it is being honest, but it's probably being honest in a way where you're not letting your emotions get the better of you.
Yep.
Because they shouldn't be getting the better of you, which is kind of it's almost like two opposites working. But yes,
Yeah.
it's an interesting sort of distinction, and that was kind of leading me on to, because I was, I think some people think negotiation and influence is manipulation, and how would you separate the two in terms of what you do, which is this trust-based influence, and actually trying to manipulate somebody for your own gains, which I guess could be tempting when you're trying to deal with a terrorist that's going to kill people.
Well, and the very last thing you said is a real critical distinction when you said for your own gains. So these influence tools are just tools. What they're being used for, am I using it at your expense? That's manipulation. Am I using it so we both prosper? That's influence. For example, we say lying is bad, and I believe lying is bad. However, if I say, look, you and I are going to dinner. On the way to dinner, we got to stop by my house. I got something I want to pick up. Why don't you come inside with me for just a second? And then we're going to dinner. We step in the front door and 70 people jump out and yell to you, surprise, it's your birthday. It's a party in honor of you, to celebrate you. Now, I lied to you, but I was for your gain. Now, most people tell lies to protect themselves because they don't know how to tell the truth. Vast majority of lies, even white lies, the classic. You got a significant other and they put on an outfit and they say, does this make me look fat? You're going to lie to save yourself. You ain't lying to protect them. You're lying to protect yourself. So what's the tool being used for? And again, I'm not an advocate of lying, but the point I'm trying to make is my communication is designed only for my benefit. That's manipulation. That's a bad thing. If it's for both our benefit and your benefiting, now we're talking about influence. Now I'm looking out for you.
Mm.
So it's all in what the tools are being used for.
Yeah. Which kind of comes back to that point you made, we talked about at the beginning, which is the long term relationship and the
Right.
collaboration. Revert back to the beginning on those ones. So in terms of lying, then how do you spot a liar or someone who's probably not being truthful? Are there? I guess that's something you probably have to pick up in these situations, or have had to pick up. Are there sort of clues that you can use to figure that out and know how to respond?
Yeah. Well, what are the tells, right? Everybody wants to know tells, like the poker term. What are the tells of lying? Well, here's how a polygraph works. A polygraph is a lie detection machine. What it really does is it lays down your baseline of truth telling. If you tell the truth, and you might not, but if you do, you tell the truth one way, or when you tell the truth, you tell it the same way every time. I can remember a long time ago, we're interviewing literally a terrorist who we'd arrested in a bombing plot. And we debriefed the guy for weeks. Now, he told us a whole bunch of stories a different way every time. Like, this dude is lying. And when we finally confronted him over it, there was one story that he told us every time. He said, he's referred to some other guys. He happened to be in Jersey, the other terrorist cell in Brooklyn. He asked an intermediary about the guys in Brooklyn, and the intermediary said, okay, well, you could talk to him. He said, but don't give him your neck. And every time he told us that story, he told it exactly like that. Plus, he made the same movement. He told the truth the same way every time. Now, you might lie 7 different ways, but when you tell the truth, you tell it one way. So, first of all, when you're interacting with someone, small talk, like, hey, how was traffic today? Where'd you come in from? What'd you have for breakfast? Small talk, if you're paying attention, is how you lay down whether or not they're telling you the truth. They say, yeah, traffic wasn't too bad. They talk about traffic. They talk about breakfast. They talk about where they're from the same way every time. Now you got a baseline of truth telling. When they lie, it could be one of 7 ways. They could look down. They could look up. They could hold their breath. They could say, well, to be honest, whatever their variety of tells, all you know is that they came out of their one way of truth telling. Your gut instinct will start to pick this up. Gut instinct is actually a supercomputer. You feel alarm bells going off on the other side. Ask yourself what's causing those to go off. You're probably picking up deception from the other side. You don't confront them on it. You just now realize that you've made yourself smarter. You understand who you're really talking to.
So on that point, then understanding who you're talking to. So if you're trying to negotiate maybe an upgrade in the room, or you're trying to negotiate with someone in a purchasing decision, and you want the
Now, what
decision
makes you
maker.
bring up an upgrade in the room, other than the fact that it's one of our favorite things to do to get a free suite upgrade in a hotel?
Well, I'm actually going on vacation next week, and I've been trying. I've got 3 hotels, and I've kind of got some points. I've booked the standard one, so I'm going to be in Palm Springs, and I'm going to be using this. So how do you, if you're talking to someone, how do you figure out? I'll use the room upgrade, but also in a business setting where you're probably speaking to someone who says they're the buyer, but they're probably not the right one. How do you identify then if that person is really the person that you should be speaking to, and sort of get through maybe the wall of them probably just protecting somebody else, or vice versa, if you are talking to someone that is the decision maker, but they're trying to pretend that they're not?
Right. All right. So, well, first of all, there's always a team on the other side, and the deal killer is at least as important as the decision maker. Just because you figured out who the most influential person on the other side of the table is, doesn't necessarily mean you've identified and deactivated the deal killer. Now, the more important somebody is in the conversations, if they have any sense at all, and most of them do, they're going to make themselves look less important. If they're in love with plural pronouns, We, us, I got a team, I got a board of directors. There's people on my side of the table. I mean, it's a mess over here. I got to go back to the board with this. The more they try to make themselves look less powerful, the more influential they are. They're smart enough to know that if you figure out how much influence they have at the table, you're going to try and pin them down. That's happened to them before. They have no desire to get pinned down at the table again. So the more in love with plural pronouns they are, the more influence they have. Not a guy who's in love with the singular pronouns. Well, I can make this deal. This is what I have. They're less powerful. That doesn't make them less important because they're potentially a massive source of intelligence for you. You want to make a friend with this person. You just want to know whether or not you're talking to a go between who has access to massive amounts of information you need, or whether it's a principal influencer. So you never dismiss anybody. You just got to put them in the right category to understand the sort of advantages that your relationship with them is going to bring to you.
So when you do find have figured out that person, you talk in your book about these different personality types and how to manage them. So what are some of the sort of I guess clues to understand, who are the different people that you're speaking to, and then some of the tips on the best way to manage those people?
Yeah, there's whoever's on the other side of the table. You either going to need to increase your clarity with them, or you're going to need to increase your relationship with them. Now, 2 out of 3 people, they're going to give you tons of clarity. So it's really strengthening your relationship and them feeling at ease with you, so that they're happy to be your advocate. There's 3 basic default types from the caveman days: fight, flight, make friends. We've pulled data, and this is a universal concept, whether you're in China, whether you're in India, whether you're in South America, whether you're in Africa. Fight, flight, make friends. We got no shortage of solid data to contend that the world splits very evenly into thirds. Certain small segments may lean a little heavier to one of the 3 types, but overall, one of the 3 types. The fight and flight types, fight type's going to give you plenty of clarity. They love to talk, they love to be heard, they want to make sure you understand where they're coming from. Massive amounts of clarity. Flight analytical dude got a ton of information, is not going to waste it on you if you are not listening. In their analysis, they have found that talking when the other side is not listening is a massive waste of time, and they value their time. They hate spinning their wheels, which is another reason why you got to demonstrate to them that you're listening, and they will open up when you do, but you got to be listening, not questioning. Asking them for information causes them to put up barriers even more. Now,
That's
the make
interesting.
friends type, that's an easy one. They love the relationship, but they're so focused on the relationship, they completely forget about clarity. If you got somebody that's just happy go lucky the entire time and you can't get them to talk about details at all right, so you got a great relationship with this person. They're going to take care of that. You got to push them a little more for clarity because they're going to leave the stuff out because they're afraid the clarity is going to interfere with how much you like them. And so letting them know that you need clarity and you want a great relationship at the same time is a critical issue with these people.
So on that, the person that you said doesn't like you to ask them too many questions. I've not. I don't find personally those people are super common, but I have come into contact with them quite a few times. And I suppose part of what I've learned from you is you want to try and ask questions and understand. So a lot of this is about asking questions. So how do you deal with someone that doesn't like you asking questions then?
Yeah, and the reality is a question causes whoever's on the other side of the table, a question causes their guard to come up some. Now, the degree that it comes up is a couple of different instances. Even a person who wants to ask you a question, if you ask a great question, if they think about it, which you want them to do, that also means they're filtering to some degree. Now, the analytical type, A very and a lot of CEOs are analysts. A lot of decision makers are analytical types. We're doing some sales training a couple years ago, and the head of the CEO stands up in front of his audience and says, "Never answer any question in an email sooner than 36 hours."
Good advice.
Good advice, because he wanted to think through all the consequences. Now, if he's thinking that in an email, he's doing the same thing in person. He doesn't want to answer your question until he's thought it through, and he likes this 36-hour mark. He put it in his emails because he learned it in his interactions. Now, you ain't asking this guy a question now when you want an answer in 36 hours. You want to know how to proceed now. How do we hack the process? What's a better mechanism? Black Swan method will teach you to queue up your information gathering via a calibrated question, which means it's got to start with the word what, and it has to be said deferentially. What's most important to you here? Or a real common one, what's keeping you up at night? What's the biggest challenge you face? Was Jim Camp's favorite question. But if the guard comes up on questions, or they're the type that won't come back to you in less than 36 hours, the companion device is a label. Seems like something's important to you here.
Hmm.
Seems like you're facing some big challenges. Now, that pivot, one of those two things is going to unlock the floodgates of truth talk. The label is more likely. Sometimes it's the calibrated what question. The other day, I'm talking to somebody and I say, "Seems like you got some obstacles here." And they go, "Yeah," and didn't say anymore. But from the body language, I realized that my label brought every one of the obstacles to the forefront of this person's mind. So now he's ready to answer. And I said, "What are they?" And boom, they came out in a flood. So if you have those two things and then you're ready in the moment to which one you're going to drop or the combination, you're going to get the information. You're not going to have to wait 36 hours.
Yeah, very, very powerful. I like that one. It's very interesting. So, what do you do about people where, or do you change the situation when you're negotiating with people? I've seen examples where you could have someone that's quite sort of passive, and if you're a bit too aggressive with them, it works against them. But I've also seen
Yeah.
I've seen situations where you have someone that's very aggressive, unnecessarily, and if you're passive, they just sort of walk all over the other person. Whereas if you kind of stand up and almost like stand nose to nose, they seem to kind of have an element of respect for the situation. I've seen it in a number, even in some sales situations. So what is going on there? You know, are there situations where some people are going to expect or respect you for, kind of standing up as opposed to kind of, being back and passive?
That's a great question. And there's kind of what's the intermediate level response, and then what's the expert response. And the combative, the assertives. I mean, I'm a natural born assertive. So I'm going to use Donald Trump as an example, and I'm not bad mouthing him or supporting him, but he's a great example. He's kind of the poster child of the assertive negotiator. Same of the three types that I told you about before. Same type I am, and I would tell you, love a good fight. When I was with the FBI, I used to come to work every day spoiling for a fight with upper management because I couldn't wait to tell upper management how stupid they were. And that's what I would have said. But who's the person in the world that Donald Trump respects probably the most? Well, if you look, your answer may well be Jared Kushner or Vladimir Putin. Now, neither one of these people argue back. Both those guys are analysts. They don't go nose to nose with Trump. You didn't see Vladimir Putin go nose to nose with Trump in a press conference. He stood back and kept very quiet. Globally, and I respect my adversaries. I got a tremendous amount of respect for Putin. I got a
Mm.
tremendous amount of respect for any of these guys. I can respect my adversary and have him still be an adversary. I would imagine that globally, of public figures, few people would argue that Trump has respects Putin and probably admires his ability to run his country. But on a smaller level, his son-in-law Jared, analytical dude. Nobody's reporting that Jared and Donald got into shouting matches. Yet who has retained a massive amount of influence with Donald Trump throughout the years? If you put him on a lie detector, he'd probably tell you he thinks his son-in-law is one of the best people he knows. Neither one of those people have ever gone nose to nose with Trump. That's been reported. And what we've seen, that's not their style. So you can be lured into combat with a combative person, and it's a B level response, but the A plus level response is the measured and calm response.
Mm, I like that, and that's interesting. So with Putin, like I've obviously he doesn't even speak English, but you can sort of see him from his body language, and he always looks as though he's in control of these
Yeah.
situations. So in terms of is that just a particular style, or is that, as you say, is he exhibiting this measured and calm response, which if you're in a difficult situation or a negotiation, is that something to kind of learn from, so you're not getting drawn, you're not emotional, and you're always the calm one in the situation?
Well, calm is contagious. And if I had the opportunity to sort of do an autopsy on the development of Putin's intellect, I would predict that he started out as an analytical guy, and then he saw in the long run how he won more than he lost. And from the assertive type, it's really hard to see, because when you win by treating interactions as if they're open verbal combat, your wins are so satisfying that you lose track of what your win percentage is. I mean, you lose track of it. When I first started teaching business negotiation right after the book came out, I'd have people come up to me and they'd say, let me tell you about this one deal. I had them over a barrel. There was nothing they could do. And I just told them what had to happen. And what they didn't realize was they have one story over the last 7 years that went like that. Now, the people that negotiate with more calm, or the real masters with calm and charm, which is highly positive, they're cutting deals every month that they could brag about. It's not once every 7 years. It's close to once a week. Their deal velocity is so good. The suite upgrade thing. I'm talking to my landlord about the suite upgrades, and because where I live, I rent. And he goes, "Yeah, I got a suite upgrade one time. I walked into that hotel and I said, 'You mean to tell me that if the president of the United States wasn't coming in here, all of a sudden you wouldn't have a suite for him?' And a clerk said, 'Well, of course we would.' So I said, 'Well, the president ain't coming. Give it to me.'" Now he remembers that as if it was yesterday, but the point is, it wasn't yesterday. He tried it 50 times, and over the last 10 years, it worked once. Now I get a suite upgrade or something that's a significant improvement in my situation every time I check into a hotel. Not once every 7 years, not once every 50 tries. Sometimes they don't have a suite. If I tried that president of the United States line and they actually don't have any suites, not only am I not getting a suite because they couldn't give it to me, which is unlikely but happens, but they ain't giving me anything else because they feel beaten up by the process. And I realize there are other things that I want. And I'm not stopping with the suite upgrade. And so I don't beat them up over it because I want more.
So, in your experience, which is dealing with the sort of, I guess, the best in the game, and I really like that, because I've learned a lot from that. I feel as I've sort of worked on a lot of your techniques, but this calm and charm I really like. But then it gets to a stage where I just get pissed off. And then you turn into it's like, okay, well, I'm going to try another method if that works. But in your experience, then holding out just that calm and charm, and if it doesn't work, then go to, okay, well, what's the next thing I'm going to ask? I'm going to try go for. Is that, if you take one thing away, is that a simple thing that in negotiation, if you kind of got control of that and your emotions, that's a really good thing to do well at, would you say?
Yeah, it's good. It's good practice, and practice the pivots and practice on, what's your objective in the interaction. If your objective is to leave them better than you found them, it's really hard to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And a hotel that I checked into not long ago, when they didn't have a suite. Now you might say, well, they had them, they just didn't feel like giving them to you. Who knows? But my method was, and finally, the guy says, "Look, we're sold out. We're sold out over the next couple of nights." I looked around, and point of fact, in that instance, there was a wedding party there, and there were tons of people there for weddings, and their parking lot was filled with Range Rovers. Now the parking lot wasn't filled with Chevy Chevettes or the Priuses. The parking lot was filled with Range Rovers. So when he said all of our suites are booked, I looked outside and I thought, well, if they're driving Range Rovers, they're probably taking the suites as opposed to the twin bed economy room. So I looked at the guy and I go, well, is it a ridiculous idea for you to make it up to me at the bar? And he goes like, no, no. And he starts handing me free drink coupons for the bar. So yeah, I mean, but I'm just trying to get into practice. And then I'm trying to get the upside. I need the small stakes practice so that when something really important comes down the line, I got enough experience to fall back on the method, the Black Swan method, so that my amygdala doesn't whisper in my ear saying, they're never going to give it to you. You're wasting your time. That's your amygdala.
I like that, and as you said, that sort of longer term view on it as well, which is a really great anchor. Leave them better than you find them, because again, if you do get angry in that situation, then you're not going to leave them better than you find them, and then I suppose it gets rid of the opportunity to have the drinks vouchers around the bar, or whatever happens. So I think that's great. One of the other things that you learn a lot in sales trainings, I've been in a number of them that talk about this, is you want to get somebody to say yes. And the more times you can get them to say yes, the more likely they're going to agree to something. And you're
Right.
completely the opposite. You're looking for people to say no. So can you kind of explain why you would want people to say no to you, and what's going on in that situation?
Yeah, well, the problem with the yes momentum or momentum selling is nearly everybody, as you learned it, including the people that are giving bad deals, exploiting people, hurting people with yes. And I think at some point in time, every human being is susceptible to this. Very few of us haven't had a time when we've been stung by it. As a matter of fact, I would contend everybody's been stung by this once. I still got in my desk a coupon book that I bought in my early 20s for $25. It was supposed to give me $25,000 in discounts. I couldn't figure out how to use any of those coupons. I still got the coupon book. I look back on it as like, would you like to have a discount on stuff that you buy every day? Would you like to give 25% off on your next major purchase? They hit me with 3 yeses. I'm yeah. And then I got stung. It's being yes battered. It's one of the reasons why there are 3 kind of yeses: confirmation, commitment, and counterfeit. Because people have been stung so many times by this yes momentum nonsense that they've gotten used to giving a counterfeit yes just to try to feel the other side out. So you eliminate this, because if you're dealing with somebody who's been yes battered, then the minute you try to get them to say yes, you trigger an instinctive memory in them of the person that cheated them. And you're now engaging in behavior in a person that cheated them, which is a guaranteed erosion of the relationship. Getting out of yes entirely is the first move. And then the crazy thing is, every human being on earth has been taught whenever they say no, not when they hear no. That's a big difference. The difference between saying it and hearing it. What happens when you say no? You protected yourself from harm. There was some unknown harm out there. There was some unknown trap, some unknown hook. When you said no, you protected yourself.
And you
And
feel in
you've done it
control as well a little bit. You know, you
exactly.
almost feel as though like, okay, I'm in control of this situation.
Yeah. So, what kind of a feeling do I want to foster in you for us to collaborate? I want you to feel safe and in control. Every time I get you to say no, you feel safe and in control. You're more likely to listen to me. You're less likely to have your guard up. You're more likely to tell me the actual obstacles. So instead of saying, like, does this look like a good deal to you? I'll say, does this look like a bad deal? Now, if I say, does this look like a good deal and you need more stuff to make the deal, I'm going to want you to say, yes, it looks like a good deal, but here's what I need. But because you're yes battered, you won't say that at all. But if I say, does this look like a bad deal? You'll say, no, it's not a bad deal, but here's what I need. And bang, you just outlined to me what you need to make the deal. Now I know either we can make it or not, but I triggered it by getting you to say no.
And then when you flip that around, you also talk about if somebody then does say yes,
Right.
is this sort of rule of three where you kind of ask them to clarify that statement so it's not a counterfeit yes, so they're actually
Right.
you're really checking that. So what just talk me through that in a bit more detail.
Well, if you say yes, I'll probably actually go yes. And you go, yeah, that's a mirror. It's designed to trigger you to elaborate, to let you know that I heard you. I put an upward inflection in it just to say, I want to make sure, clarification. Now, you may just come back with yes again, which is entirely possible because I've gotten you to repeat the yes. Now, I'm trying to get you to repeat more than the yes. I really need the more. And the mirror is the first tool that I'm going to use. So if I don't get any more out of you, I'll hit you with a label. So it seems like this is a good deal for you. Just an observational statement, label design to get more. You're probably going to say a couple more words, and then, yeah, it's a good deal for me. Now I'm going to start hearing some tone of your voice because I need to know if there are reservations. The last thing I'm going to do, if you've given me two solid yeses, I'm going to say, okay, so we've talked about this up to now. I'm going to basically paraphrase what we just said. I said this, you said, yeah, I asked you a couple times if this was a good deal and it's worked for you. You responded positively both times. We are free to proceed. Now, even if you're still giving me the counterfeit, I've now created a moment in time where I really drilled in on the yes, not in a manipulative way, but giving you the feeling like you can get out of this if you want to, which preserves your autonomy, which actually increases your likelihood of doing it. It also puts me in a position where if you don't perform, I say, look, last Thursday at 12 o'clock noon, I asked you three times if this worked for you, and three times you told me it did. And now that it's not working, when you told me three times that it did, what did you want me to hear? Leaves me in a perfect position to deal with this if it goes bad.
All right. And following on from that, then, if someone says you're right, you don't want them to say, "Yeah, you're right, Chris."
Uh,
You want them to say, "That's right." What happens? What's the difference between "you're right, Chris" and "Yeah, that's right"?
yeah, this is another one of those when, whether we're hearing it or whether we're saying it, two different worlds. Like we love to hear you're right, makes us happy. We get satisfied. What happens when we hear it and we hear you're right, and we get satisfied? We get a big happy smile on our face and we stop talking because we're right. What are you doing when you're saying you're right? Colleague, family member, significant other, somebody you either want to or have to preserve the relationship with who will just not leave you alone on something you have no intention of going along with. You look them in the eye and you go, you're right. And they shut up and they stop talking. There ain't a human being on earth that is not using this device to get somebody to shut up. Yet we don't imagine that if we used it to get people to shut up and leave us alone, that someone would do it to us. In fact, we probably did it three times this week. We probably had it done to us three times this week. You're in so much trouble if somebody looks at you and says, "You're right," because they're politely asking you to shut up. Now, the 2 millimeter shift of "that's right" is what somebody says when you have demonstrated to them that you get it, that you get them. And it's this involuntary change in the response. When someone says something to you that you completely agree with, and that them uttering it either gave you an insight or made you feel relieved because of an internal pressure, you go, "That's right." That's what people say when they're all in on what they just heard. And the crazy thing about that is it's a bonding moment. They bond to you, and it's an epiphany moment which triggers action in favor of you. And that's why so many people that learn the Black Swan method, all they do is get that's rights out of the other side, and the other side gives them their deal. And how often does it happen? How often does it have to happen?
So are there situations then when it's a lost cause, and two things, how do you know when it's a lost cause, and how should you think about something where it's like, look, there's no way out of this. This is, we're just not going to be able to agree.
Well, there's really two categories there. There's something that's a lost cause, and there's something that's just not worth the time. There's a saying, it's not a sin to not get the deal. It's a sin to take a long time to not get the deal. Hostage negotiators had a 93% success rate, which means that 7% of the time, tactical option is the only outcome. We had to learn to recognize them. We now call these people the 7%ers in the Black Swan method. 7% of the time, you are never going to make the deal with these people. Just never. So you want to sense that early, and you want to move on, because it's going to take you a long time to not get the deal. And the 7%ers are also going to keep you from the people that you could have made deals with. That's the other problem. Now, the other category is what we call half. And I got that phrase from Joe Polish, good friend of mine, runs the Genius Network. He's actually trademarked the phrase half: hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. Joe is a genius, that hence Genius Network. And Joe says you could make the deal with these people, but it's hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating, which means it's going to suck the life out of you. And it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a bad deal. So it didn't take you a long time to not get the deal. It took you a long time to get a bad deal. We cut the halves out also. The L in half could be lucrative, as Joe says. It could be hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating. But we found, since we've implemented this methodology with my team, and we don't train everybody that wants to get trained by us. We do not. If you're going to be a half customer, we have found that dealing with you is going to be painful every step of the way. Dealing with you is going to take longer than it should, which reduces our profit. And the real kicker is, because you're half, you're going to think we're half. There's no repeat business here. One of the things that my director of business development, Davy Johnson, has found out, she says the halves don't repeat, and the elves do. Easy, lucrative, and fun. Who really wants to do business with you, who knows you're the solution. Our elves repeat, our halves don't. Who do you want to spend time with? The guy's going to suck the life out of you and give you no repeat business, or the person who's not going to suck the life out of you and is going to be a customer for life? It's a pretty obvious choice.
So you just really want to identify those 7%, and I guess it can be difficult, as you say, when they're lucrative. But I suppose it's just you need to eliminate them essentially, and not waste your time on them.
And I will tell you a great tell. If they're dangling from the very beginning, how lucrative they are. They're a half, at least. All of our top executives in our company are being coached by an outfit called Strategic Coach Dan Sullivan, brilliant dude out of Canada. Coaches entrepreneurs. This is not coaching for corporate executives. You're not going to know what we're talking about or Dan's talking about. Successful entrepreneurs building big organizations. Dan says anybody that calls him up on the phone and says, I got all this value for you, I got all this value to give you, to show you. He hangs up right away. That's dangling how lucrative it is up front, the bright, shiny object. Dan has found how to ID the halves or the 7%ers right up front, does not engage in conversations with you. So great mechanism. They're either 7% or a half on the other side. If they're telling you about this great opportunity, about all this value, they're gonna suck the life out of you.
I think we've all been there quite a few times to identify that type of situation. I know I certainly have. A good advice, though, just to be aware of it and not waste your time on those ones.
Yeah.
So, look, a couple of questions before we wrap up. But before that, Chris, what you've got sounds amazing for people, business people at different levels. Can you just sort of simplify the different ways that they can kind of get involved with you, from a sort of a free, easy option to maybe one which is more of a bigger investment for bigger organizations?
Well, the best return on your investments is start out what's going to be the book. Never split the difference, because you're always going to have it. It's a good read. Tall Rod's a genius writer, and the return you're not going to have a return on investment that's better than the book. Now, next step after the book, free resources. The first free resource is our newsletter because it's actionable, it's concise, and it's free. And the free part is not important. What is important is it's actionable and concise. Go to the website, find it on the upper right hand corner, blackswanltd.com. Sign up for the newsletter. You're going to get a long way from with the book and the newsletter alone, and start to practice. Start in your small stakes practice. Steps after that, check out the website for other free resources. We got a ton of free stuff. When you wade into our training, we got, essential training, basic. Everybody hates the word basic. Basic is essential. What's essential for you to learn? We've got it packaged in different digestible doses, from a 90-minute session to get you started to when you got a lot on the line. We got the coaching and the training for you, but you're going to have to get yourself to that point. It's not going to take long. You'll be surprised at how quickly it'll come to you, but you got to put in the work.
Yeah, and I certainly I've been listening to a ton of you. You've got some great interviews on YouTube, and you're doing some sort of mini sessions. I've done a lot of that, but I agree with what you've said. It's something that you just have to. You can learn it, but you've got to keep practicing it. Otherwise, you sort of it drops off. So I certainly support that idea. So a couple of things then before we wrap up. So one of the things I know that comes up a lot in all different situations, particularly business, is price. And you referenced something called this I think it's Ackerman model.
Right.
Give us your sort of insights in terms of price and how to successfully negotiate that.
Well, if you get into bargaining, and bargaining should be your last move, not your first move. But if you get into bargaining, it's going to go through 3 rounds, and you got to make the other side feel like they won. How do you make them feel like they won? Decreasing increments. You pick a target price. You plan on getting there in 3 moves. You never make a move unless the other side makes a counter move. And each one of your moves is smaller than the last. Decreasing increments. The other side feels the brakes being put on. Finish on an odd number. If you've applied empathy throughout the process, there's a really good chance you're going to cut the deal on your first number. We see a lot of people that prep the Ackerman model. Rough estimate, you pick out your target price, you come in at 65% of the target price. That gives you the opportunity to make the 3 moves. Put a lot of tactical empathy in. You got to understand tactical empathy. You got to be patient and calm. You got to apply it liberally. And lo and behold, people will settle the deal on the second move when they're like, wow, it came to me much more quickly than I expected. Because people are not prepared for an emotional intelligence approach, a soft approach in a hard bargaining situation. They're used to combat, and they will be thrown off balance in a very good way if you come in with a gentle approach that is really laced with the application of what we refer to in a Black Swan method as tactical empathy.
Fantastic. And my final question, Chris, this is a personal question, but escape your limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. You've got some crazy stories in your book, probably about in terms of what you've done. But what would be a memorable example of where you've had to, or you have escaped your own personal limits?
Wow. Really we make it happen on a regular basis when I've got a good wingman in the negotiations. So I will get into a negotiation that I may have taken to impasse, and that happens with me, or I just choose not to accept what the other side is offering. We'll negotiate in tandem. I'll have my son Brandon as a co-pilot, or I'll have Derek as a co-pilot. And I'll think we're at impasse, and my co-pilot's only job is to hear what I'm not hearing and to occasionally just provide some commentary on the process, in the process, to all sides involved. Very much like the recent negotiation when my son said, look, we understand how much of a strain on a relationship our demands are putting. I never would have thought to say that. But because he was in there as a wingman and he's a step back, we opened a deal up when I thought it was going to go down the tubes at that point. So, with a good wingman, man in generic terms, women happen to be better at this than men are, you can really escape your limits.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, thank you so much. I've said in the short time I've been preparing for your interview, I've learnt a lot and I've seen the benefits. And one of the ladies who works with us, Alicia, one of her close friends has also put this into her business, and she's also said it's made a massive impact. She was a huge fan. So you've got a lot of fans out there. Please keep up the work, and I really do appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt. It was my pleasure.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.